you can still have habits even if every day doesn't look the same. Hello, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today we are going to talk about habits. If you clicked on this video, how to achieve my goals when life feels unpredictable, you're like, what? That's not the same thing. What does this have to do with habits? And what I'm here to tell you is that the key to achieving your goals when life feels all over the place is habits and having things that you do every single day. But now you're like, wait, how am I supposed to have a habit, something that I can do every day, if my life feels all over the place? And maybe your life feels unpredictable because that's just your regular schedule. And sometimes you have this work schedule or that work schedule, or you have kids and they throw in that layer of unpredictability, or you're about to go through a life change and maybe there's something unpredictable about that. But truthfully, regardless of the other commitments that you have going on in your life, and we all have different commitments, life in general is unpredictable. There are going to be days that you have more time to work on your goals. There's going to be days that you have more energy to work on your goals. And then there are going to be days when you just want to be a couch potato for the entire day. Most of the time, we set our goals and therefore our habits based on our aspirational selves. We say, I want to do X and I want to be at this level. And then we feel like a failure when we don't accomplish that. We think that, well, when life goes according to plan and when my kids are healthy and my job is regular and all of these things are in place, but I can do that. I can work out 5 times a week for 30 minutes. I can read 5 books a month. I can do 1 load of laundry a day. And you're not wrong. When everything lines up and life is as predictable as we wanted it to be when we planned out our day or our week, we can do all of those things. But most of the time, that is not how life pans out. Most of the time, something pops up. Whether that is the energy level we woke up with, something going on with someone else in our lives, our work, our commitments, the weather. There are so many factors that impact our day-to-day lives that impact our plans and our habits and our goals. So on one hand, you've got everybody telling you you've got to be consistent and you've got to create habits and that is how you're going to achieve your goals. And then on the other hand, you're like, but life is all over the place. And some days I have no idea what it's going to be like the next day. So how do you do both? Today, I'm going to talk about 2 different mindsets to have when it comes to picking habits that fit your life. I'm going to talk about 2 different ideas, and you can either pick one that really feels like it fits with you and your life and what you're working towards, or you can do a combination of both, which is what I tend to do. Kind of depends on the habit. It kind of depends on the goal. But I'm going to give you 2 ways to think about picking habits and helping them fit in to your unpredictable life. So the first thing I want to talk about, the first mindset about habits, is to start where you are. And I'm sure you've heard people tell you this before, right? Start where you are with what you have, whatever that quote is. What I mean by this is set your habits based on where you're at right now with a reasonable increase, which may not be where you ultimately want to be. This is way easier to talk about with an example. So let's start with water. It's a really common goal to want to drink more water. Drinking more water, by the way, I'm not gonna go into a tangent about how amazing it is, but it can impact a lot of areas of your life. Highly recommend drinking more water. That said, there are lots of recommendations, first off, on how much water you should drink. If you try to like Google, because I've done it, if you try to Google how much water should I drink, there are a million different responses. There are 64 ounces, a whole gallon, half your body weight in water, but you need to add if you have coffee, you need to take out if you eat this many vegetables. Like there are so many different calculations on how much water you should drink. But for our example, let's say you want to drink 64 ounces or a half a gallon of water, which goes to that like 8 ounce glasses recommendation that has been there for a while. So you want to drink 64 ounces of water. Great. But if I asked you right now, how much water are you drinking daily at a minimum? Not on average, not on my best days, not when I work out, not when no, at a minimum, how much water a day are you drinking? And if you tell me I'm drinking 1 cup, which by the way, I much prefer to measure water in cups like this because it is so much easier to say my goal is to drink 3 of these as opposed to my goal is to get 64 ounces. This is so much easier to measure. Ounces are hard, especially if you're not from the States, you're not gonna measure in ounces, but I would recommend measuring it in cups. So you tell me I drink 1 at a minimum of these a day. Okay, great. So if you wanna drink more water and maybe your ultimate goal is to get to 3 of these, your goal for the next month is gonna be 1.5. So you've upped it slightly from what you're doing at a minimum, but you're not going all the way to where you want to go. Because if you jump from 1 of these a day to 3 of these a day, like that, you're going to have more failures than you are successes. You're going to have more days that you don't hit that. Now, by setting it at 1.5, I'm not saying that you're gonna be able to be perfect. There are likely still gonna be days that you miss that goal, but at least you're going to have more wins than losses by setting it at a lower point of a goal. So then for a month, you track 1.5. And let's say at the end of the month, you did that for 20 out of 30 days. Great, the next month, you can either keep it the same and set a goal to get more than 20, or you bump it up to 2 and then see how many days you get. Depending on how motivated or unmotivated you can be by seeing those empty check marks, that's how I would encourage you to set that next goal. So if you bump it up to 2, but you only get 15, guess what? That's actually probably more water. I'm not gonna do that math, but it's probably more water than 1.5 for 20 days. But the purpose of this example is that you're setting your water goal based on where you're at right now and working towards where you want to get to. I see this all the time where people will set their goals because that's where they ultimately want to be, and then they achieve it 1 out of 7 days of the week and feel like a complete failure. I would rather you lower that bar way, 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 way down and hit 5 days out of the week, 6 days, however many days out of the week, and feel awesome about that, and then up it a little bit and keep working on that until you get to where you want to be. And then I also have a bonus tip related to this mindset, and that is to focus on one brand new habit at a time. One brand new habit at a time. If you have never tracked water before in your life, and this is brand new to you, then maybe you start with 1. And the habit that you're focusing on is actually tracking your water. And then once that tracking is a habit, then you up it to 1.5. But if you are really focused on your water and that's a brand new habit for you, I would encourage you not to also start a new habit of tracking and working on your step goal, or tracking and working on your reading goal. Focus in on one new habit at a time. And this can be really difficult, especially at the beginning of the year when you want to start all the new habits and you want to take that January motivation to get you into all these new habits. But if you start working on too many things at one time, you're more likely to give up on all of them. Whereas if you focus in on one habit at a time, you are a lot more likely to be successful at that one habit, and then it will stick and you can layer another habit on top of that. All right, the other mindset I want to talk about as it relates to habit is something I've talked about in a couple of different lives and in various other calls and conversations, but I've never sat down and talked about it in its own video. And so I'm excited to have a place where I can reference this when I tell people about it in the future. And that is setting habits based on your average self or your average day. Again, we set habits not only based on aspirational where we want to be, but we set habits based on our highest, most energetic, awesome self. I call it my superhero version of me. If I set habits based on superhero Laken, I would do those like maybe 3 times a month. There's probably like 3 or 4 days a month that I feel awesome. I have all the energy, I am doing all the things, I'm checking it all off, I'm ahead of schedule, I'm surpassing all of my own expectations, and I'm awesome. And I used to set habits based on that version of myself. Well, when I'm at my best, I can read 30 minutes a day. If all of my morning routine things line up perfectly and I don't get behind and I don't dilly-dally and scroll through Instagram on my phone, I can have 30 minutes of reading every single day. That happens again, maybe at that point, once or twice a month. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, there's probably a few days a month that you're the opposite of superhero you. Probably if you're female, it syncs up a little bit with your cycle, but there's a few days a month that you're way down here. And it doesn't matter what your habit is, you're not likely going to have the energy or the umph to work on any of them. What I want us to focus on is this middle. Probably 70 to 80% of the month, we're our average selves. We have average energy levels, we have average amount of time to commit, and that is our everyday. That is most of the days. That is what we should be setting habits for. Because if we're setting habits for our average self, which is the majority of the time, then we're going to achieve our habits the majority of the time. And even when life is unpredictable, that's still the average. Most of the time what happens is that we base our unpredictable lives on those extremes. We say, well, some days I'm really awesome and I can do this, and some days are really, I'm not awesome and I can't do that. That's true, and we do have those days a lot during the month, but we're judging our entire month on those types of days and whether we're awesome or terrible rather than on our average days. So when we set habits based on our average selves, we're able to be more successful more often and therefore continue and follow through on our goals, which we talked about last week. Going back to my morning routine, I've always wanted to incorporate journaling. I know the benefits that I get from it mentally. I get things out of my head. It's all very helpful. But journaling is not my favorite activity, and I also tend to get a little bit bored and want to move on to the next thing. And so for me, I've realized that my average self journaling is about 5 minutes. That is about where I live in terms of journaling, is 5 minutes, and then I'm done and I'm ready to move on. Now, are there days that I could probably keep going when I'm superhero me? Yes. And are there days that I completely skip journaling in my morning routine? Absolutely. But my average self shoots for 5 minutes a day for journaling, and I hit that, again, probably 70 to 80% of the time. Now, when you're thinking about your average self or your average day and trying to pick a habit that fits within that framework, there's a lot of different factors that you could consider. And just like I said at the beginning, it could vary based on your habit, which one you pick. It could vary based on your personal preferences and what works best for you. Or it could vary just based on the month. You could decide this month I am picking my habits based on time, and next month I'm picking it based on energy. But those are the two big ones, is time and energy. So on an average day, how much time do I have to accomplish this goal? That's the habit that we're working towards, is that average. Another really beneficial way to think about it though is in terms of energy. One of the things that I have learned this past year is that my energy levels differ every single day. There are days that I have lots of energy and days that I have lower energy, and it's based on a lot of different factors. So in order to have a habit that I can do every single day, I have got to make it so that it works on my average energy days. Now that does mean that some days I'm pushing myself a little bit. So my best example for this is working out. I have tried a lot, especially working out at home, to up my workouts to be something longer than 30 minutes. But that doesn't work for me. What I have learned is my max energy level for at-home workouts is about 30 minutes. Because once I get to that point, my mind is done, sometimes my body is done, and I don't have the energy to keep going. Now, are there days that that's a little bit of a push for me? Absolutely. There are days that it's like that last 10 minutes, I'm like, I don't want to finish this, but I'm closing this ring on my watch and I'm gonna do it. And then there are days that I probably could have kept going. So if I set my goal for 45 minutes of working out, on those days that I could have kept going, I would. And I would hit that 45 minutes and I would feel great. But there would be a lot less days that I would be able to push myself to that goal. So instead, I set my goal at my average. I know that some days I'm probably quote unquote falling short from my max capacity or my max ability. But if that means that I am doing it regularly and consistently and feeling good about it, it's worth it to me. Now I'm gonna give you an example that combines both mindsets and then another bonus tip. Let's talk about steps. Another really common goal in addition to the water is getting a certain amount of steps in. And again, I think one of the big problems here is that there's a generally accepted goal of getting 10,000 steps a day. That's awesome. Do you know how long it takes to get 10,000 steps in a day? Especially if you're somebody who sits at a desk for a lot of their day. Getting 10,000 steps in is a really big commitment. And most of us are not even close to that when we get started on a step goal. So when we take whatever we're at and we push ourselves and say, I want to get 10,000 steps a day, it is really, really tough. And we are, again, going to fall short more often than we hit it. So what I like to do with steps is, back to tip number one, start with where we're at. So I had a one-on-one client who had not worn her Apple Watch in a very long time. And I said, all right, the goal this week is just to wear it. I want you to just wear it and I want to see where we're at. And she was afraid that the numbers were going to be very low. And working from home and not going anywhere right now, and they were pretty low in terms of what she was hitting day to day in terms of steps. But now we have the number, and just like the water, I took the minimum, what was the minimum she was getting per day, and I upped it a little bit. And I said, okay, now this is the goal. This is your daily goal to hit this number. And so that we started with where she was and we hit that daily step goal. Then we worked on getting that daily step goal up until we got to a place that it was basically her average day being a little bit more active and being a little bit more thoughtful about moving around the house and things like that. But she didn't really have to go above and beyond, right, at that point. So she worked on that daily step goal and we kept increasing it a little bit over time, and she would incorporate short walks here or there. But then we reached a point where that number was her average day, right? We reached a point where if she set a higher daily goal, it wasn't really gonna fit into her schedule because she was going to have to go get more longer intentional walks in order to get those steps in, or do something above and beyond that she wasn't going to be able to commit to every day with the other things that she had going on in her life. So at that point, we left that as the daily goal. That was the daily, was based on her average day. But she still wanted to get more movement into her life to help her towards her goals. So that's when we incorporated a weekly goal. So we took what that daily step goal was, right? We multiplied it by 7, and that was her current weekly target. And we upped that just a little bit. Now, it didn't mean that we had a new daily. The daily was still down here, but now the weekly was a little bit bigger, which basically at the first time that we did it meant that she had to go take one 10-minute walk outside additional in the entire week, over the whole week. So she would still get a check mark when she would hit that daily goal that we kept. And then when she hit her weekly goal by one of those days being above and beyond, she would get her weekly goal. That's the bonus tip, is incorporating some sort of weekly goal. It especially works well with steps because our average self can usually hit a certain number. For me, my average day-to-day step goal is 5,000. That is, I get those from walking around my apartment. I usually get like 2 to 3 from walking around my apartment, and then I get another 2 to 3 from going out of the apartment for one thing. Going to get one errand between the stairs and walking in New York City, I will usually get to 5,000 steps doing those 2 things. So that's my daily step goal, is 5,000. Now, my weekly step goal is 50,000. And again, you're like, that math does not work out, Laken. 5,000 times 7 days is 35. Where are those extra 15,000 steps coming from? Well, those are coming from the days that I can go above and beyond. Those are coming from the days that I go to dance and I have to walk to and from the subway a couple more times and I get steps at dance. Those are coming from the days that Sam and I go out to dinner and we walk to dinner and it's a 10-minute walk to and from the restaurant, and so I get steps for that. That's where that bonus is coming from. But by having a daily goal based on my average self and then a weekly goal to push me a little bit, it helps me get to my goals even when life is unpredictable. Now, are there days that I don't hit those numbers? Absolutely, all the time. But those are the goals that I've set based on where I'm at, my average self, and then what I want to accomplish. So I said a lot in this video. I basically gave you everything that I know and apply to my own personal habits. I hope that this was helpful for you. This was a question that recently came up on our Patreon live Q&A call. Something that we talked about on our January call was habits and setting habits for your average self. One of my favorite things about the Patreon community is those monthly Q&A calls, because not only do I always get something out of it, but I love seeing the support between the community members and the suggestions that they give each other. So if you have been thinking about Patreon, I'm gonna leave the link down below. Come join us. The calendar for February is live and all the calls are recorded anyways if you aren't able to make it live. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, please click that subscribe button. I upload new videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday focused on helping you achieve your goals. Thank you so much for watching. One that really fits, why can't I say this? For years. Which, blah, blah, blah. So that was a stupid example, delete. We have average amount of time to commit. Hair, what's wrong?